Hikers of Reddit, what is the weirdest, scariest thing you've seen on the trail? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Was bushwhacking near my house when I heard some rustling in front of me. I see a large grizzly bear bolting in the other direction. Adrenaline kicks in immediately, and I run back along the trail over a creek, hear water thrashing down the creek, see the bear charging at me. We both noticed each other and said, "Oh shit," and ran in the opposite directions. Glad he wasn't hungry that day. The bear said, "Oh shit?" That's awesome. Went to a nature preserve while on vacation last summer. My friends and I stumbled into an area with crime scene tape that had been broken in the middle. I stopped at the line to take pictures of this awesomely massive, gnarly tree, which held one end of the crime scene tape. My friends just waltzed into the area, oblivious. I did a quick Google, and there had been a body found there. My friends stopped on the other side of the tree and said, "Guys, you've got to see this." When I stepped around, how do I explain this? If you've ever seen the first released anime of Full Metal Alchemist, Nina and the Wall After Scar, the tree had a giant, spiky-looking scorch mark on it, right at the human head level. Since I had an odd view of it, I could see the flies swarming, and then I see gore stuck to the tree in the center of the scorch mark, blood and small, spongy masses. We laughed. No information had been given about the circumstances in which the body was found. The only articles I've ever found about it said that there was a non-suspicious death. Maybe a suicide? We'll never know. Not as scary as what others have witnessed, but I once saw a guy straight up setting up a home in the middle of the woods. This dude had a mini fridge, a fan, a whole IKEA bed, a toilet that connected to the lake. Mind you, this was all under a fallen tree that made it look like a cave. Was shocked and surprised, but walked away really quickly before the guy could spot us. Went for a solo backpacking trip, simple overnight, 10 miles in, 10 miles out sort of thing one time, and when I picked up my permit, the ranger told me there had been a mountain lion spotted in the area over the past week. When I approached my campsite, I saw some mountain lion tracks on the trail, which was more cool than freaky or scary, but where it crossed into freaky scary was the collection of fresh tracks that appeared overnight while I slept that walked right through my camp. There were plenty of deer in the area that I saw myself, and typically a mountain lion will stalk a herd of deer over the course of some days to see if it can isolate one to kill. I know intellectually that the likelihood of a mountain lion attacking me is pretty small, but it is still a freaky thing to wake up to, and it made the hike out feel a bit ominous, as though the cat was around, aware of my presence, watching from a distance, etc. A bone of a dog hanging like 7 feet in the air on a tree branch. I also saw a completely built house made from dead trees with beer bottles scattered everywhere. A few other small things was a very old and dirty baby doll head and a rabbit skull, completely dried and without flesh. Wasn't on a trail, but I also saw a squirrel that was missing half of its flesh directly down the middle, from its head to its toes. Half perfectly fine, other half skeleton. My first time backpacking, which was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. I went with some experienced people, and we had everything we needed to be prepared. We were in an area that has black bears, so we had our food in bear-proof canisters. Our first night in the woods, we had some leftovers from dinner and candy and such, and couldn't fit it into a bear can, so we hung it from a tree. A bear walked into our camp right before we went to sleep, got to only 2 or 3 feet away, and then went over to where we tied up our food and stayed there until it ate it all. The next morning, we went over to the bear cans and found out that it or another bear had broken into one of them and devoured everything inside. I've been hiking a lot this year because the pandemic had everything closed. Throughout my prep work for these hikes, I've been getting more and more paranoid about meeting a bear out there. I watched YouTube videos about what to do if I met them, watched some when animals attack vids as well, which were obviously not as helpful, bought bear spray, and even though people said that black bears don't really attack, went through all the training manuals I could find about them. Then, the moment came. There I was at Wilderness Road State Park in Virginia, and suddenly, bear. All my training comes back to me. I'm ready and armed with spray, holding my camera, a tripod-like weapon in my other hand, and the bear just looks at me, then moseys over to another bush, continuing to eat his berries without giving me a second glance. I'm standing there, heart racing, watching my arch nemesis just stroll away. For the briefest second, I'm like, "Oh, come on, fight me, fight me!" I'd been preparing for this for months now, and he was just over there eating berries until he wandered away. It was so anticlimactic until I realized that was a good thing. A pair of moldering hiking boots sitting abandoned besides a rock at a remote creek crossing that could be pretty dangerous in early season. On another occasion, a puddle of blood on the snow on a very low-traffic climber's trail. Yes, it was blood, not the red algae that can live in snow. It was literally an opaque, congealing puddle. Not a very big puddle, like a rabbit's volume of blood, I imagine. My partner and I hypothesized that a bird of prey must have killed some little animal there, because there weren't really any signs of tracks or anything nearby, but still it was weird. Finally, one time my partner and I were descending from a ridge traverse in really horrible weather, the most intense wind and rain I've ever been in actually, and the only other person we'd seen all day was this gnarly old trail runner dude. To say the least, it was punishing. When we made it back to the parking lot, neither of us had a dry spot on us. Rain had blown up sleeves and down collars, and we literally had to help each other peel out of layers. We were so saturated. While in the middle of this, the trail runner dude also arrives in the parking lot. He looks as cold, wet, and demoralized as we are. 1,000-yard stare like he no longer cares if he lives or dies. Then, he proceeds to strip completely naked, fling all his soaked gear into the back of his Yaris, then get in and drive away. Au naturel. It all happened so fast we almost weren't sure what we actually saw, but that's probably for the best. I was walking on a sandbar parallel to a river in the mountains. There was non-stop thick brush between me and the river, and brush again on the other side of the sandbar. The sandbar was only about 8 feet wide. This was in mountain lion country. All of a sudden, I came across a 3-foot wide fresh, wet drag mark through the sand, coming out of the river, out of the brush, across the sandbar, and into the brush on the other side. I turned and hightailed it back to camp as fast as I could. This may not be the weirdest, but definitely a weird and creepy one. I once found the head of a white-tailed deer just in the middle of the trail at around 7 p.m. at night. It clearly wasn't just discarded. It was right in the center of the trail and was looking down the trail in my direction. Yeah, I've never turned around on a trail so fast. You never know what you'll find out there. It was either some sick joke or someone had worse plans for the next backpacker to come down that trail. Absolutely horrifying. A creepy old man following me and my platonic female friend. We decided to turn back and drive to a different trailhead after finding the undergrowth on the trail that we were on to be too dense. It was a trail that we knew to be relatively unpopular for the area. When we turned around, this man was standing next to a bicycle about 6 to 8 yards behind us, looking at his cell phone. I thought it was unusual that he had forced his bike through the undergrowth that my friend and I had found challenging to navigate on foot, and that he just so happened to be stopped with his cell phone in his hand and raised up to his face the moment that we turned around. I suspected he had to be filming us. On the walk back, when we had come upon a corner to turn, I looked back and saw the man still standing in the same spot and now looking at us rather than his cell phone. Why was he paying so much attention to us? Why didn't he continue about his business heading down the trail? To this day, I wonder what may have gone down if we had walked any farther away from the trailhead and further into isolation with this man following us. Weird AF, scary AF. I used to live in a forest area in Europe. When I was about 13, me and my friend decided to get ice cream. We had to bike a few kilometers through the woods to get there. So, we're riding our bikes in a desolate area where there is a biking path, but nobody really comes there often. I spot something colorful in the woods next to the road and tell my friend to stop. We went over, and it was this little red shirt. It was hanging from a branch. It was obviously from a child, and it was very dirty and looked like it had been there a long time. We looked around a little more and found a little dirty shoe around the tree and a jacket. We were weirded out, but it somehow didn't make sense. The shirt was hung up high, too high for a child to reach, so an adult must have done it. The clothes looked like they were there for a long time. How did nobody find this? Was this some kind of prank? And what parents would let let's say their 5-year-old be alone in this area? We didn't really think any more of it and just kept on biking, but sometimes I still think about it. Last summer, we went to our favorite camping area and we found something weird in one of the campsites. Just 5 to 10 feet away from where the cleared out ground ended were at least two partial deer skeletons, sort of in a circle. There were definitely two spines and a jumble of other various bones that may or may not have been another partial spine, leg, bones, etc. It very well could have been animal kills, but it didn't really make sense as a place for an animal to den or otherwise try to hide food. It was right next to the camping area, which was right off of the road, and the whole area right there was really open. Additionally, if you went very far away from camp in the direction of the bones, you would hit a really steep slope that more or less surrounded this little campsite. It just felt off and the whole vibe was weird, so we decided to camp elsewhere, just in case. I ran into an old guy, but naked, with an expensive camera set up on a tripod taking pictures of himself naked. Then he fled into the woods. Well, this trail we parked on can only fit one car, and he parked near the start of it. So when we went to leave, we got to his car and had to honk the horn for a good 20 minutes. Then he shamefully walked out of the bush with like a tablecloth covering his junk and hopped in his SUV and drove off. 4 or 5 years ago, me and my brother were growing dope in northern Ontario far out, and we always carried bear mace and machetes because of the black bears up there. But one time, right when we got up to our crop in very thick brush near a swamp, we heard a massive animal moving, so we laid down and just went quiet. We sat there for a good 5 minutes, and whatever it was probably scared it, but we never saw it. But I would like to think it was a blackberry or black bear, because we found an old hibernation den near there, but it was probably a moose, because whatever this animal was, it was pushing a lot of trees while it was moving, and we just sat there facing to the ground, scared shitless, holding our machetes and mace, prepared for the worst. Some crazy stuff we saw growing dope. I have so many stories, I could fill this thread with, I don't know, if people want me posting this much. While in Alaska, I stumbled upon a very large moose who was sleeping in some foliage. In Denali National Park, it's so dense you can easily be 10 feet away from something and not know it. Its calf was only 5 to 10 feet beyond it, so I have myself, Mama Moose a few feet in front of me asleep but stirring because of my noise, and Baby Moose maybe 10 feet past Mama Moose. I almost pissed myself. Moose are insanely dangerous and more than happy to stomp the life out of someone who they think is a threat. I slowly and quietly as possible backed out of the way. Once I was 100 feet, took 20 minutes in that foliage, I got back on the main trail and gave them a considerable amount of distance.